The courtroom doors opened at 10:30 a.m., and 42-year-old Eduardo Gonzalez walked in wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. His appearance was striking. His completely bald head gleamed under the courtroom lights, and elaborate tattoos covered every visible inch of his skin. Intricate black ink snaked up his neck, across his skull, and most shockingly, covered his entire face. A stylized skull adorned his forehead. Teardrops marked the corner of his left eye, and Gothic lettering spelled out words in Spanish across his cheeks and jaw. His hands bore the unmistakable markings of Gulf Cartel affiliation, a crowned CDG on his right knuckles. He shuffled to the defendant's table with complete indifference, his tattooed face showing no emotion. Behind him, 2 federal marshals stood watch. Across the aisle sat 2 couples who looked like they'd aged a decade overnight. The parents of the dead children, flown in from Honduras, their eyes hollow with grief. Before we dive into what happened in that courtroom, if you believe in justice and want to support a new channel dedicated to sharing these powerful stories, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Every subscription helps us bring more of Judge Caprio's wisdom to light. The federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Santos, stood. Your Honor, the United States versus Eduardo Gonzalez. Federal charges: human smuggling resulting in death, conspiracy to transport undocumented persons, child endangerment resulting in death, 2 counts, and racketeering in furtherance of organized crime. These charges carry a maximum sentence of life in federal prison. Judge Frank Caprio looked at the file before him, and in his 37 years on the bench, he'd seen many disturbing cases. But this one, children dying in the dark, hit differently. He looked at Eduardo, whose tattooed face remained completely blank. Mr. Gonzalez, do you understand the charges against you? Eduardo's voice was flat, accented. Si, Your Honor, I understand. The prosecution alleges that on November 3rd of this year, you transported 8 children, ages 7 to 14, from Matamoros, Tamaulipas, Mexico, across the border into Texas in a refrigerated truck. 2 of those children, siblings aged 9 and 11, died during that transport. Is that accurate? Eduardo shrugged, the tattoos on his face shifting with the movement. I drove a truck, yes. What happened inside? Not my responsibility. The courtroom tensed at his casual tone. Prosecutor Santos stood again. Your Honor, if I may present evidence. Proceed. Santos pulled out photographs. On November 3rd at 6:47 a.m., Border Patrol agents stopped a refrigerated truck at a checkpoint outside McAllen, Texas. The driver was Eduardo Gonzalez. When agents searched the truck, they found 8 children locked in a false compartment behind refrigerated cargo. 2 children, Miguel and Sofia Hernandez, brother and sister from Honduras, were already dead. The other 6 children were suffering from severe hypothermia and oxygen deprivation. They're currently recovering at Rio Grande Valley Medical Center. She handed the photographs to Judge Caprio. His face went pale as he looked at them. Mr. Gonzalez, have you seen these photographs? See, I see them. These are children, dead children, 9 and 11 years old. They died locked in darkness, freezing, unable to breathe. Do you have anything to say about that? Eduardo's tattooed face remained impassive. Esto es negocio, Your Honor. This is business. Gulf Cartel controls the border in Tamaulipas. If people want to cross, they pay us. Those 2 kids, triste, yes, sad. But the journey is dangerous. Everyone knows the risks. The courtroom erupted in gasps and angry whispers. The Honduran parents in the gallery broke down sobbing. Judge Caprio held up his hand for silence. Let me understand something. You're calling the deaths of 2 children business? Your Honor, I am just the driver. The truck had technical failure. The refrigeration system, it doesn't work correctly. Not my fault. I don't maintain the equipment. You locked 8 children in a hidden compartment in a malfunctioning refrigerated truck and drove them across the border. How is that not your fault? Eduardo leaned back, his heavily tattooed arms crossing. Their parents, they sign papers. They know the risks. They pay $8,000 for each child. That's $64,000 total. Good money. They want their kids in America. They take the risk. What happened next would expose the full horror of his operation. Prosecutor Santos presented documents. Your Honor, we have statements from the parents of all 8 children. They were told by Gulf Cartel operatives, specifically by Mr. Gonzalez, that their children would be transported safely in a passenger vehicle. They were shown photos of comfortable vans. They were promised their children would have food, water, and supervision throughout the journey. None of that was true. None of it, Your Honor. The children were locked in a 4 by 6 foot hidden compartment with no ventilation, no light, no bathroom. The temperature inside was approximately 35 degrees Fahrenheit. They were there for 7 hours before the truck was stopped. Judge Caprio turned to Eduardo. You showed these parents photos of comfortable vans, took their money, and then locked their children in a freezer? Eduardo shrugged again, the skull tattoo on his forehead seeming to shift with his indifference. People believe what they want to believe. I show them pictures. They pay money. What truck I use, that's logistics. That's business decisions. Business decisions. 2 children are dead. Your Honor, con respeto. People die crossing the border every day. It's the reality. The parents, they desperate. They want better life for their kids in America. So they pay. We provide service. Sometimes things go wrong. It's unfortunate, but it's part of the business. If Judge Caprio's compassion moves you like it moves millions of others, show your support by subscribing to our channel. We're just starting out, and your subscription means everything. Santos continued. Your Honor, I'd like to call Rosa Hernandez to testify. She's the mother of Miguel and Sofia, the 2 children who died. A small woman in her late 30s stood from the gallery, supported by her husband. Her face was ravaged by grief. Through a translator, she spoke in Spanish, her voice breaking. We are from Honduras. My husband worked 3 years, to save $16,000 for Miguel and Sofia. We wanted them safe from the gangs, from the violence. A man came to our village, said he could get children to America safely. He showed us pictures of nice vans, said there would be adults watching them, said they would have food and blankets. We believed him. Did that man work for Mr. Gonzalez? Yes. He said Mr. Gonzalez was experienced, that he had transported many children safely. We trusted him. We gave him all our money. We said goodbye to Miguel and Sofia, told them we would see them soon in America. Her voice broke completely. The next time I saw my children, they were dead. In those photographs. Their lips blue, their eyes... Dios mío, their eyes were open. They died scared and alone in the dark. And this man... She pointed at Eduardo with a shaking hand. He doesn't care. He doesn't even care. Eduardo stared straight ahead, his tattooed face showing nothing. Rosa's husband, Carlos, stood up, tears streaming down his face. Trabajé 3 años. I worked 3 years for $8,000. Pensé que los estaba salvando. I thought I was saving them. He killed them. Él los mató. Judge Caprio's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Mr. Gonzalez, you're listening to the parents of the children who died in your truck. Do you have anything to say to them? Eduardo finally looked at the parents, his tattooed face as blank as stone. I am sorry for your loss. But you signed the papers. You knew there were risks. I did not force you to pay. You chose this. Carlos Hernandez lunged forward, held back by marshals. Asesino, murderer, you told us they would be safe. You lied. You took our money and killed our children. Judge Caprio banged his gavel. Order, Mr. Hernandez, please sit down. I understand your pain, but you must let this court proceed. Prosecutor Santos presented more evidence. Your Honor, Mr. Gonzalez has been a known operative for the Gulf Cartel for over 15 years. He specializes in human smuggling, particularly of unaccompanied minors. In the past 5 years alone, he's been linked to at least 12 separate smuggling operations. This is the first time children have died under his watch. But Border Patrol estimates he's transported over 200 people, many of them children, in dangerous conditions. How much money has he made from these operations? Based on the $8,000 per person rate and conservative estimates of 200 people, approximately $1.6 million over 5 years. The Gulf Cartel takes a percentage, but Mr. Gonzalez keeps a significant portion as the operational lead. Judge Caprio looked at Eduardo with barely disguised disgust. You've made over $1 million transporting desperate people, including children, in dangerous conditions. And you call this business? Eduardo's tattooed face finally showed the hint of a smirk. Your Honor, America wants cheap labor. Mexico has poor people who want to work. I connect supply and demand. That's capitalism, no? I learned from watching American business. You learned to exploit desperate parents and endanger children. I learned that everything has a price. Those parents, they want American dream for their kids. I provide the way. They choose to pay. Nobody forces them. You lied to them. You showed them fake photos. You promised safety and delivered death. Eduardo shrugged one more time, and that casual gesture, so dismissive of 2 dead children, seemed to break something in Judge Caprio. The judge stood up from his bench, his face red with fury. Mr. Gonzalez, in my 37 years on this bench, I have seen evil in many forms. But your cold, calculated exploitation of parents' desperation, your complete indifference to the suffering of children, your reduction of human lives to business transactions. This is a level of cruelty that shocks the conscience. Your Honor, I am just. You are a murderer. You locked 8 children in a metal box with no air, no light, no hope. 2 of them died terrified and alone, calling for parents they would never see again. You took $64,000 from families who had nothing and gave them back corpses. And you sit here covered in tattoos that tell the world you're dangerous, you're criminal, you're not to be trusted. And yet, you wonder why I don't have sympathy for your business. Eduardo's expression finally changed. A flicker of anger crossed his heavily tattooed face. I grew up in Matamoros with nothing. The cartel gave me opportunities. In Mexico, you join or you die. I did what I had to survive. And Miguel and Sofia? What were they supposed to do to survive? They trusted you. Their parents trusted you. You betrayed that trust in the most horrific way possible. Prosecutor Santos stood. Your Honor, the United States is seeking the maximum sentence. This is human trafficking resulting in death. Federal sentencing guidelines recommend 40 years to life. Judge Caprio looked at the file, at the photographs, at the grieving parents, and finally at Eduardo Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez, you transported children in conditions designed for cargo, not for human beings. 2 children died in terror, freezing and suffocating in darkness. You took money from desperate parents and gave them nightmares. You speak of business. I speak of murder. He paused, letting the words hang in the courtroom. I am sentencing you to 40 years in federal prison. No parole, no early release. You will be 62 years old when you're released, if you survive. Those 40 years will be spent in a cell not much bigger than the compartment where Miguel and Sofia died. Perhaps then you'll understand what it feels like to be locked away from everything that matters. Eduardo's tattooed face showed emotion for the first time. Shock and rage. 40 years? That's my life. For an accident? It wasn't an accident. It was negligence. It was greed. It was cruelty. And yes, it will cost you most of your life, just as it cost Miguel and Sofia all of theirs. I did what the cartel told me. I'm just a soldier. You made choices. You took money. You locked children in a freezer. Those were your choices, and now you face the consequences. As marshals prepared to take Eduardo away, Rosa Hernandez stood one more time. Through her translator, she spoke directly to him. My children were good. Miguel wanted to be a soccer player. Sofia loved to draw pictures of butterflies. They had dreams. You took those dreams and turned them into nightmares. I hope every day of those 40 years you see their faces. I hope you remember what you stole from this world. Eduardo looked at her, his tattooed face unreadable, and said nothing. 3 years after the trial, the Hernandez family still struggled with grief. Carlos had returned to construction work in Honduras, but suffered from severe depression. Rosa could barely look at photos of Miguel and Sofia without breaking down. Their surviving children carried the trauma of losing their siblings. But something else happened. Rosa and Carlos, with support from immigrant rights organizations, began speaking at schools and community centers throughout Central America. They shared their story, the lies they were told, the money they lost, the children they buried. Their message was clear. Don't trust the smugglers. Don't risk your children's lives. Find legal pathways, no matter how long they take. Their advocacy helped dozens of families avoid similar tragedies. They couldn't bring Miguel and Sofia back, but they could honor their memory by protecting other children. If this story touched your heart, if you believe judges like Frank Caprio represent the best of our justice system, please support our new channel by subscribing and liking this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that justice and compassion can coexist. Comment below with your city. Let's build a community that believes in fairness for all. Eduardo Gonzalez sits in federal prison in Texas, where he'll remain until 2063. His heavily tattooed face has made him recognizable to other inmates, many of whom have children of their own. Prison hasn't been kind to him. He spends most of his time in protective custody, isolated from the general population. The Gulf Cartel replaced him within weeks. Human smuggling along the border continues. Children still die in trucks, in the desert, in rivers. But every case prosecuted, every smuggler imprisoned, represents a small victory against an enormous evil. Judge Caprio kept a photograph on his desk, not of Miguel and Sofia in death, but of them in life. A photo their parents had provided, showing 2 smiling children with their whole lives ahead of them. It reminded him that behind every case number, every legal document, every cold statistic, were real people with hopes and dreams. The courtroom is the great equalizer, where cartel operatives and grieving parents stand on the same floor, where tattoos and fancy suits don't matter, where actions have consequences and justice, however imperfect, tries to balance the scales. Eduardo Gonzalez walked into that courtroom thinking 40 years was impossible for just business. He walked out understanding that when your business is human lives, when your profit comes from parents' desperation and children's suffering, when 2 kids die cold and alone because of your greed, 40 years isn't punishment enough. Sometimes justice can't bring back what was lost. It can't return Miguel and Sofia to their parents' arms. But it can ensure that the person responsible spends the rest of his life remembering what he did, locked away from the light, just like those children were in their final terrifying moments. That's not just justice. That's accountability.